My ex lied about being pregnant to keep me paying rent, so I exposed the truth and walked away while she lost everything she tried controlling. I'm a 27-year-old guy who genuinely believed I'd finally found stability when my girlfriend sat across from me, hands trembling, and whispered that she was pregnant and terrified about our future. The room felt quiet, almost hollow, and all I could hear was the shake in her voice as she said, "Please don't leave me. I can't do this alone." Something inside me snapped into protector mode immediately, fear and devotion flooding my chest at the same time. I told her, "I'm not going anywhere, I promise," even though my mind spun with panic and the weight of responsibility settling hard on my shoulders. From that moment on, everything became about keeping her safe and proving I wasn't like the men who'd hurt her before. I picked up extra shifts, skipped dinners with friends, and quietly rerouted my paycheck to cover her rent, groceries, and what she called urgent medical costs. She would rest her head against my shoulder and whisper, "You're the only one who cares about me." And those words sank straight into my heart. I wanted to be the man who showed up, the one who broke her cycle of abandonment, the one our child would never fear. Still, unease began creeping through the cracks of my devotion. Every time I asked if I could attend a doctor visit, she tensed and replied, "It's better if I go alone. Stress isn't good for the baby." Her eyes never quite met mine when she said it. I told myself it was just hormones or fear, anything except the idea that something felt wrong. When she turned her phone away in the dark and sighed softly, a quiet chill crept into my chest, whispering that this wasn't as solid as it looked outside the glow of belief and hope. I'm a 27-year-old guy who started reshaping my entire life around the belief that I was about to become a father, and every decision suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before. She began suggesting we needed a fresh start, somewhere bigger, somewhere more suitable for a baby. Her hand resting on her flat stomach as she murmured, "We can't raise our child in a cramped place like this." My chest tightened every time she said the word child, and I nodded. Even when my bank account flashed warnings I didn't want to acknowledge. "We'll make it work," I told her, forcing confidence into my voice while anxiety chewed quietly at the edges of my thoughts. Her request grew more urgent, more emotional, always wrapped in the same fragile tone. "The baby needs stability," she'd say, eyes distant, voice trembling just enough to break me. I found myself handing over more money, covering deposits, utilities, anything she insisted was essential. When I hesitated, even for a second, she'd look wounded and whisper, "You don't want our child to suffer, do you?" Each time, guilt swallowed my doubts, and I convinced myself that this was just what responsible men did. But the more I gave, the more entitled her tone became, gratitude slowly replaced by impatience. If I asked about receipts or medical papers, her expression tightened. "Why are you interrogating me?" she snapped once, turning away sharply. The warmth that once softened her face twisted into something defensive and cold. Still, I apologized, even when I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me, wondering why the distance between us felt heavier than ever. Her phone buzzed softly on the bedside table, screen lighting up briefly before she flipped it face down. When I asked who it was, she replied too quickly, "Just my cousin. Don't worry about it," and rolled over, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. I watched her silhouette in the dim light, heart tangled between love and unease, wondering why the woman carrying my supposed child suddenly felt like a stranger sleeping inches away from me. I'm a 27-year-old guy who started realizing every disagreement somehow turned into proof that I was already failing as a future father. The smallest question became an accusation in her eyes. The slightest concern twisted into emotional cruelty. "Why are you stressing me out like this?" she snapped one night when I calmly asked if she could show me the appointment slip. "Do you want to hurt your own child before it's even born?" Her voice shook dramatically, and suddenly I was the villain for needing reassurance. I watched her crying melt into frustration, then into silence, almost on command, and I hated myself for noticing the pattern. She would clutch her stomach and whisper, "I can feel it reacting when you raise your voice," even when I knew I wasn't yelling. My chest tightened with panic as she turned every moment into a test of loyalty, a performance I was terrified of failing. "I'm trying my best," I pleaded once, palms open, voice low. She scoffed, eyes glassy but calculating, and murmured, "Then stop questioning me like I'm lying." Slowly, she began monitoring everything I did. "Where are you going? Why are you late? Did you really need to spend that much on yourself?" It felt less like a relationship and more like an emotional probation I couldn't escape. Each time I tried to breathe or push back, she made me feel selfish for thinking of anything except her and the baby. I swallowed that guilt until it tasted normal, until I stopped recognizing my own reflection in the mirror. The apartment felt heavier, the air thick with tension I couldn't name. The soft light from the kitchen window couldn't warm the cold that kept settling between us. She would scroll through her phone while I sat beside her, pretending not to notice the way her lips curved into quiet, secretive smiles. When I asked what was funny, she didn't look up. "Nothing you'd understand," she muttered, fingers moving quickly across the screen. A sharp, unspoken fear crawled through my ribs as I stared at her profile, realizing how far away she felt despite sitting inches from me, and wondering when exactly I had lost control of my own life. I'm a 27-year-old guy who started noticing that the timeline of her pregnancy no longer made sense, and that realization felt like a quiet betrayal blooming in my chest. The dates she mentioned shifted every time I asked. Symptoms appeared and vanished without explanation, and her belly never seemed to change the way she insisted it was. Still, I swallowed my doubts, telling myself I was just overthinking. That fear was making me paranoid. "You're just nervous about becoming a dad," I muttered to my reflection one morning, trying to believe my own excuse. But the inconsistencies kept piling up, and they wouldn't stop whispering at the back of my mind. I began secretly Googling late at night, scrolling through medical forms and pregnancy timelines, my phone screen glowing pale against the darkness of our room. According to everything I read, nothing matched what she was experiencing. My stomach twisted as guilt battled suspicion, torn between love and the terrifying thought that I might be protecting a lie. When I finally asked her gently about it, she stiffened. "Why are you analyzing my body like it's a science project?" she snapped, eyes narrowing with irritation. "I told you the doctor said it's normal. Why can't you trust me?" Her words hit hard, laced with disappointment and something colder beneath it. I lowered my gaze, murmuring, "I do trust you. I just want to understand." She scoffed and turned away, shoulders tense, leaving an icy silence hanging between us. That night, while she showered, her phone lit up beside me on the bed, vibrating softly. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the screen flashed a preview from an unsaved contact, laughing emojis followed by words that made my breath stutter. I hesitated, fingers hovering inches above the device, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the sound of running water. My thoughts raced, fear twisting with disbelief, as I stared at the glowing screen, knowing that whatever was waiting there could change everything. I swallowed hard, pulse shaking through my fingertips, and slowly reached for the phone as another message appeared. I'm a 27-year-old guy who froze the second her phone unlocked beneath my trembling hand, the glow painting my guilt across the dark room. I never meant to invade her privacy, but the message preview shattered whatever innocence I still clung to. "How long can you keep up the fake bump?" it read, followed by a string of laughing emojis and a reply beneath it that drained the blood from my face. My breath hitched as I scrolled, every word slicing deeper, every joke about milking him for rent, twisting like a blade in my ribs. My mind refused to accept it at first. This had to be a misunderstanding, a cruel misread, some context I was missing. But the more I read, the clearer it became, a grotesque confirmation painted in casual cruelty. "He'd do anything if I cry hard enough," she had written, followed by a voice note I couldn't bring myself to play. My chest burned as betrayal crawled upward, choking the air from my lungs, as if the room itself had turned hostile. I set the phone down carefully, hands shaking, and sat there in disbelief as the sound of the shower shut off. My heart was racing so hard I thought she might hear it. When she stepped into the room, wrapped in a towel, she smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey, you okay?" she asked softly, as if I were still her devoted partner, instead of a man staring at the ruins of his entire reality. "Yeah," I whispered, forcing my voice steady. "Just tired." She moved closer, resting her hand on my shoulder with the same rehearsed tenderness that once comforted me. "You worry too much, babe," she murmured. "I've got you, remember?" Her touch felt foreign now, cold, like it belonged to a stranger wearing her face. Inside, something cracked wide open, turning each heartbeat into a raw echo of humiliation and rage. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand the truth, but a strange calm settled over me instead. A calculated silence replaced the shock, a quiet resolve forming beneath the ache. I watched her lie so effortlessly and realized I couldn't reveal my hand yet, not when knowing the truth finally gave me power. As she lay beside me, rubbing her stomach in a performance that now disgusted me, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions, plans, and a growing determination to uncover everything. The woman who claimed to carry my child was nothing but an actress, and I was no longer just her victim. But she didn't know that I'd already seen behind the curtain, and she smiled softly, believing the illusion was still alive. I'm a 27-year-old guy who now had to pretend everything was normal while my entire world cracked silently beneath the surface. Every smile I forced felt heavy. Every, "I love you," she whispered, burned like acid in my ears. I kept playing the devoted boyfriend, nodding when she talked about baby clothes and nurseries, while my hand secretly saved screenshots and archived every cruel message I could recover. My heart ached with betrayal, but something colder had taken root. A slow, controlled focus that refused to let emotion sabotage the truth. She kept escalating her demands, suddenly more dramatic, more desperate, as if she sensed my shifting energy. "I'm feeling lightheaded today," she murmured dramatically one morning, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Maybe I need more vitamins, and the doctor said stress is bad, but we're low on money again." I stared at her, forced my lips to curve into concern, and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it," even as resentment coiled deep in my gut. Inside, I felt hollow, watching her perform motherhood she never intended to live. She rested on the couch, scrolling through her phone while I worked late and watched our bank account bleed. "You're so lucky to have a man like me," she muttered once, not even looking up, assuming my generosity was permanent. Each word she spoke felt rehearsed now, every affection choreographed for control, and I was choking quietly on the realization that I had been nothing but her financial safety net. At night, when she fell asleep, I sat in darkness, replaying her lies, comparing timelines, documenting every inconsistency. The air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves knew the truth she was still hiding from the world. I stared at her sleeping face, noticing how effortlessly peaceful she looked, and wondered how someone could betray so deeply and still breathe so calmly. My silence was no longer weakness. It was restraint, a gathering storm. I whispered into the darkness, barely audible even to myself. "You have no idea what's coming." As her phone buzzed quietly beside the bed again, another message flashing across the screen. And this time, I didn't look away. I'm a 27-year-old guy watching her slowly transform my private nightmare into a public performance. One designed to paint her as the fragile, struggling mother-to-be, and me as the distant, emotionally unavailable partner. She started posting vague, heartbreaking updates online, filtered selfies with captions like, "Some men change when responsibility scares them," and "Trying to stay strong for my baby even when support disappears." Each post felt like a silent accusation, aimed straight at my chest, and I could already sense the quiet judgment forming in people's eyes. Friends I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly messaged me, their tone cautious, distant. "Is everything okay with you two?" they'd ask, like they already believed her version more than mine. When I confronted her gently about the posts, she didn't even flinch. "I'm allowed to express my feelings," she snapped, chin lifting defensively. "You don't get to control how I cope." I swallowed my anger, nodding, even though the irony nearly suffocated me. She wasn't coping, she was shaping a narrative, and every word she typed tightened the emotional cage around my throat. At night, she scrolled through comments full of sympathy and validation, while I lay beside her feeling invisible, erased, replaced by the version of me she invented. "I just wish you'd show more care," she murmured one evening, not even looking at me. "People are starting to notice how cold you've become." Her words slid under my skin, twisting the knife deeper, knowing she was the one scripting my villain arc. I felt trapped between screaming the truth and preserving my control, between exposing her now and letting her continue to dig her own grave. Around me, the world started shifting, the air thick with misinformation and quiet suspicion. Even my own reflection felt unfamiliar, like a man slowly losing his place in his own story. She leaned back against the couch, resting her hand on her flat stomach dramatically, whispering, "I just hope our child has at least one parent who really cares." The bitterness in my mouth tasted metallic, sharp, but I said nothing. Because beneath the humiliation, beneath the growing tension, something darker was forming, a resolve that refused to stay silenced much longer. And as another notification buzzed on her phone, I noticed a name I didn't recognize, followed by words that made my pulse spike. I'm a 27-year-old guy who finally snapped when I saw that message glowing on her screen, the cruel question hanging there like a taunt meant just for me. My hand shook as I turned the phone toward her, my voice raw and breaking as I whispered, "What the hell is this?" The color drained from her face for a split second before she masked it with rage, her eyes hardening as if I'd committed the real crime. "You went through my phone?" she shouted, pushing herself off the couch, voice sharp and venomous. "You're invading my privacy while I'm carrying your child?" My chest tightened, every breath feeling like glass scraping my lungs. "Don't twist this," I said, struggling to keep my tone steady. "They're talking about a fake bump, about lying. Tell me the truth." Her expression shifted fast, tears welling up as she grabbed her stomach dramatically. "How dare you stress me like this?" she sobbed, voice rising. "If anything happens to the baby, it's on you." Her words slammed straight into my ribs, leaving me stunned, helpless, questioning my own sanity again. She paced the room, shaking, crying, performing every emotion so violently that I felt the ground slip beneath me. "I knew you'd end up just like the rest," she hissed. "Cold, heartless, abandoning me when I need you most." I stood there, frozen, my reflection in the dark mirror looking smaller, weaker, like a man folding inward on himself. My logic screamed that I had proof, that she'd exposed herself, yet her manipulation still clawed at my chest, forcing guilt into places it didn't belong. I stumbled back onto the edge of the bed, head in my hands, as my world tilted out of alignment. Every sacrifice, every late shift, every dollar I handed over, replayed in my mind like a cruel montage. I felt stupid, used, empty. She hovered over me, eyes blazing with a mixture of rage and wounded pride. "You're going to regret doubting me," she spat. "Everyone will know the kind of monster you are." My heart pounded painfully as she stormed toward the door, snatching her bag and phone, her footsteps echoing across the apartment. The silence she left behind felt deafening, heavy with everything I couldn't fix or explain. And as the door slammed shut, leaving me, alone in the dim, suffocating quiet, I realized I had never felt more broken, more trapped, or more terrified of what she might do next. I'm a 27-year-old guy who sat alone in the suffocating silence she left behind, my thoughts spinning between rage and disbelief. The apartment felt colder without her dramatic sobs, but the echoes of her accusations still clung to the walls. My hands trembled as I replayed every message I'd saved, every inconsistency I'd documented, realizing I couldn't survive another minute inside her fabricated reality. Somewhere beneath the chaos, a sharp clarity began slicing through the fog, and I knew I needed undeniable proof, the kind that could no longer be twisted against me. So I did the one thing I'd been too afraid to do before. I called the clinic, whose name she'd casually dropped weeks ago, my voice barely steady as I said, "Hi, I'm calling about an appointment under her name." The line went quiet, the receptionist's tone shifting. "I'm sorry," she replied carefully, "but we don't have any record of a patient by that name." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Are you sure?" I pushed harder. "She said she's been coming here for prenatal care." Another pause, then softly, "Sir, there's no pregnancy file here." The truth crashed over me like freezing water, stealing the air from my lungs. My knees gave way, and I slumped onto the couch, phone pressed helplessly to my ear. Every lie suddenly rewound in perfect clarity. The fake appointments, the evasive smiles, the staged tears. I ended the call and stared into the empty space in front of me, my reflection in the dark screen looking shattered and hollow. It was real. She was never pregnant, not once. My chest tightened, not just with anger, but with the devastating grief of realizing how completely I'd been played. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to feel anything other than this quiet ache pulsing deep in my bones. Instead, a strange calm settled in, deliberate and dangerous. I opened my laptop, organizing screenshots, timestamps, and recordings, assembling the truth she tried so desperately to bury. The power dynamic had shifted, and she didn't even know it yet. As the night stretched on, my phone vibrated again, her name lighting up the screen, followed by a desperate text. "We need to talk. You're scaring me." I stared at the message, heart pounding, knowing whatever came next wouldn't be quiet. I'm a 27-year-old guy who stared at her message, feeling the strange shift from fear to control settle deep in my chest. "We need to talk. You're scaring me." The irony almost made me laugh, but the sound caught in my throat. She'd spent weeks terrifying me with lies, guilt, and emotional traps, and now that the truth was solid in my hands, she was suddenly afraid. I typed back slowly, deliberately. "We'll talk soon. I just need honesty." Her reply came instantly. "Of course, I've always been honest with you." The lie felt almost insulting now. Instead of confronting her right away, I started to move quietly, strategically, like someone dismantling a bomb wire by wire. I sent the screenshots and clinic confirmation to my closest friend, my voice shaking as I explained everything over the phone. "She was never pregnant," I whispered, still struggling to believe the words. Silence hung on the line before he muttered, "Holy hell, are you serious?" That reaction alone told me how deep her manipulation had gone, how convincing her performance had been to everyone around us. One by one, I reached out to the people she'd subtly poisoned against me, the ones who'd watched her play the abandoned victim online. I didn't lash out. I didn't rant. I simply showed them the proof. The messages shifted, tone softening with every screenshot they saw. I had no idea. She told us a completely different story. Each response felt like air slowly returning to my lungs, but my hands still trembled every time my phone buzzed. Meanwhile, she kept calling, sending waves of emotional texts. "You're shutting me out. I'm scared. Please answer me. You're being cruel now." I let every word sit unanswered, watching the narrative she built begin to crumble without me saying a single public word yet. The silence I once feared now felt like a weapon, sharp and controlled. Outside, the night air pressed against the windows, cool and heavy, as I sat surrounded by evidence and truth. My pulse raced with a mix of dread and resolve, knowing I was about to pull the final lever that would change everything. And just as I decided it was time, a new notification flashed across my screen. A public post from her, tagged with my name, filled with the desperate final plea. I'm a 27-year-old guy who watched that public post spread like wildfire, her words dripping with desperation as she painted herself as the wounded mother fighting for her unborn child. The comments poured in fast, strangers defending her, calling me heartless, some even threatening, and for a moment the weight of it almost pulled me back under. But then I looked down at the proof in my hands, the truth she'd buried so carefully, and something solid anchored me again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as my heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with a quiet, simmering certainty. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I uploaded the screenshots, the clinic call confirmation, the timestamps, every cruel joke she'd sent about, milking me for rent. I kept my caption simple, sharp, impossible to twist. There was never a baby. Here's the truth. Within minutes, the tone shifted. Confusion replaced outrage. Shock replaced sympathy. People started deleting comments, editing their words, messaging me privately, apologizing for believing her performance. "I feel sick," one wrote. Another said, "She told us a completely different story." Watching that shift was surreal, like seeing the tide turn in slow motion. Her response was immediate, frantic, and unhinged. "You're ruining my life," she texted. "How could you do this? You're disgusting." Her online persona cracked, replaced by panicked rambling that no longer made sense. Friends stopped tagging her. The likes and supportive hearts faded, replaced with questions she couldn't answer. "Is this true?" Someone commented on her post, and for the first time, she had no believable reply. I sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, the glow of my phone reflecting off the walls like a spotlight I couldn't escape. I should have felt victorious, but instead, a strange sadness crept in, mourning what I thought was real, the future I'd imagined, the child that never existed. Still, beneath that grief, there was clarity. She no longer controlled the story. She no longer controlled me. Then my phone rang, her name flashing repeatedly, vibrating with desperate urgency. I knew if I answered, she'd beg, manipulate, scream, or collapse in fake tears. I stared at the screen, jaw tight, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. And as the ringtone echoed through the quiet apartment, my hand slowly moved toward the phone, unsure if the next words I heard would be apology, fury, or something far darker. I'm a 27-year-old guy who finally answered the call, my voice steady, in a way I didn't recognize as my own. The moment I said hello, her sobs exploded through the speaker, raw and frantic. "You destroyed me," she cried. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You didn't have the right." Her words felt hollow now, like echoes from a story I no longer belonged to. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange calm settle over the years of chaos she'd poured into my veins. "You were never pregnant," I said quietly. "You lied to control me. You used fear to empty my pockets and trap my mind." There was a long silence on the other end, the kind that exposes truth more than any confession. When she finally spoke, her tone shifted, stripped of drama, almost cold. I just didn't want to lose the protection you gave me, she muttered, as if that somehow justified everything she'd done. I swallowed hard, the words slicing through whatever emotional thread still lingered. You lost it the second you chose lies over honesty, I replied, my voice trembling but resolute. Outside, the faint hum of traffic drifted through the open window, night air brushing my face like a soft reminder that the world still existed beyond her manipulation. She kept talking, begging, apologizing, twisting explanations into half-hearted remorse, but I stopped listening. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I was just done. And that quiet realization felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had.